Hello. My name is John Lichtenberger, and this is my testimony. If you're family, some of you may know me as John or Johnny, and some of you may know me as Yochanan from the chat rooms and the feast we have been to. My civil name is John Craig Lichtenberger. I was born William J. Lichtenberger, also known as Bill or Dad, and Carolee K. Knight, also known as Mom. I was born on what the world calls December 12th, 1970. In case you're doing the math, that would be 49 years of age as of this recording, 2020. I was born in Norwalk, California, raised in Buena Park. I have two older sisters, Joanne and Judy. And yes, I'm the baby of the family. My guess is that the letter J was my parents' favorite letter. Either that, or they liked the Sesame Street quite a lot. We weren't wealthy, but we weren't poor either. The journey on how I met the father and his son is a long journey. It would take hours to share. So I will shorten it for you. When I was young, I had come down with a disease called pseudomonas pneumonia. Pseudo meaning false, and monas meaning a single unit. Is a genus of protobacteria, which is a part of a larger family of pseudomonads. I can't pronounce it correctly, so you have to excuse me there. Pneumonia is also an inflammation of the lungs, of one or two or both of the lungs, caused by an infection. Basically, this caused brain damage due to the lack of oxygen in the brain. Not too long after, they diagnosed me with cerebral palsy, which is a big name for brain damage. How I was diagnosed was a miracle in and of itself. One day, I was really sick and turning blue. Mom was visiting my grandparents, and a neighbor of theirs told my mom to take me immediately to the hospital. When Mom took me to the doctors, they didn't know what I had. And they took me in and got me breathing again. However, that would be short-lived as my mom and I were in a room, and once again I turned blue. She couldn't get anyone inside the room, so she got their attention by throwing stuff outside the hallways and shouting for help. They took me as soon as they got in and began to work on me once again. My mom stayed as long as she could until visiting hours were over, and they told her to go home. She hesitantly did, and I'm sure she had lack of sleep that night. And I'm sure both my parents were praying for me at the time. The next day, my mom went to my room and saw that I wasn't in my bed. I went into a panic searching for where I was. She was stopped by a staff member and was told that I was in the playroom with the other children. The doctor finally told her what had happened while she was gone. The doctor didn't know what to do with me, and as my life was fading away until the orderly's quick reaction looking into the medical books as to the diagnosis of what I might have and gave the doctors the information they needed to heal me. Now, as a side note, my advice is to thank Yahweh for answering prayers and to thank parents for their prayers. Also, thank doctors and nurses for their hard work that seems to be unseen. Hallelujah for them. I truly do thank them. But without them, I wouldn't be here. As you can see, the beginning of my journey in life was a rough one. But this was only the beginning of the salvation journey. Yahweh. And just to clarify, I do use the true names of both the Father and the Son and other biblical persons out of respect for them. Yahweh had plans to bring me into his kingdom. Just as a side note, that plan is still ongoing. It never ends until the day I die. In order for me to be in the kingdom, I had to know the king of that kingdom. And this is that story on how I met the king. Excuse me. Despite the prayers that my parents gave for my life, they weren't particularly religious in nature, at least not outwardly. The only times that they would show any semblance of it was on the holidays where Christmas decorations were set up, or on Easter where baskets were put on the chimney. I do remember a time I had asked Mom about the nativity scene she put up one year. It was a small figurine set up, and all I remember her saying was that it was baby Jesus who was born in Bethlehem. But that's the reason why we celebrate Christmas, which confused me because I thought it had been about getting presents at the time. I just shrugged my shoulder at baby Jesus, not really understanding it. Years had gone by with me learning how to walk and stumble through it. I remember I had used a walker for a short time and not understanding what I had and why other children didn't have one, and I did. Nothing was really explained to me much as a child, but just learned to accept it internally as something that happened to me. I went from walker to canes as soon as I was about 3 or 4 years of age. Say right around there. Once I had canes, though, I felt free to move as fast as I could. More mobile, but there was a drawback to that, and that was lots and lots and lots of falling. All I knew was the floor was cold, and I better get up. I learned really fast to get up. I didn't have much friends growing up, and I learned to entertain myself real quick. I would sit for hours at a time just playing with toys, so much so that my grandmother one day worried that I was too quiet. So she checked on me, and there I was, just playing with my Hot Wheels on our coffee table. However, deep down inside, I longed to play with other children my age. I finally did one day at a softball field. Mom and Dad were heavily involved in softball because of my older sisters. One day, we had the usual trek of going to the games and parked in the usual spot, and they took me out of the car and placed me on the ground with my canes. It was then that I saw 2 young boys. One said, "Hi, I'm Evan." The other said, "I'm Ryan." To my shock, they were talking to me, so I introduced myself and said, "Hi, I'm Johnny." We became fast friends that day and onwards. We would play all over the place, using my canes as pretend guns or dig holes so our toys would fit in it. Just talk about things, anything, really. We had gotten to know each other pretty well. And finally, one day, we were playing on the grassy park area at the park. And they took my canes away from me and said, "Come on, Johnny, get your canes." Now, they weren't being facetious. They weren't being cruel. You see, they knew that I could walk a little. I just wanted to encourage me to walk. So trusting them, I did walk for a few steps without my canes. Being part of their world just for a moment, made me feel a little closer to feeling some sense of normalcy. I want to be a part of this world, but there was another part I was a part of, and that was special education. I would go to an elementary school, but was separated with the kids with disabilities. The normal kids would go to their part of the school, and we would go to ours. While I did make friends there, I still longed to be a part of that world of normal. In fact, there was a fence that separated us while we were playing outside. Some scars healed, and some remain. My first real scar that remains even to this day began on a spring morning day. The trees were blooming with fresh green leaves, and the laughter of children playing in the background. The air was clean for a moment until pollution settled in my life. Recess had just begun. I was in the second grade, I believe. The age of exploration. I wanted to find out what was beyond me, beyond the fence that separated the other kids and I. The excitement filled my heart as I watched the others play, wanting nothing more than to be a part of that. I watched some play hopscotch, some others play dodgeball, and some boys playing football. I heard the laughter as they played, wanting to laugh with them. I smiled, hoping that that day would come. After digesting all that was going on, a couple of boys decided to throw a ball over the fence to see what we would do. The ball flew high, and it seemed to go in slow motion as my eyes were fixated on it. Finally landed. It finally landed, and I appointed myself an ambassador of some sorts to reach out. So I went to get the ball. I threw it over, thinking they wanted to play. To my great surprise, I was just entertainment for them. They billowed out profanities, and yes, small kids do cuss from away from their parents, and did mock gestures at the way I threw the ball. I walked up to the fence, heartbroken, and asked, "Why did you do that?" One of the boys, the one that threw the ball, walked up to the fence and said, "'Cause it's fun to see you cripples think you will be like us. You will never be like us." He let out a laughter that still rings in my ears to this day. Those words haunt me, echoing over and over and over again. At that moment, tears started to flow down my face. A realization came to me that day. No matter how hard I try, I will never get over the fence. I sometimes, in my darkest moments, feel like I'm the one doing the entertaining behind whatever fence there is. Which is why it's hard for me to share my story, because I don't want to be entertainment. I want to encourage, make people laugh. Which is why it's hard for me to record as well, and why I have written it down so that I can properly give you my testimony. I'm reading it as I'm talking to you, in hopes that there will be people out there that could be encouraged by my story and on how I met the King. Now, this small event was a big change on how I saw myself. This event that plays in a variety of ways over and over again throughout the years. Whether it was a small lie or told to do something I was too naive to figure out at the time, and I was the main entertainment of the day. I think the song by Jars of Clay says it best. How I felt at the time and how I feel most of the time, especially in my darkest hours. And I do have moments of those. And the song is called Sad Clown. It goes something like this. Say, how's the weather? So I look out the window to brighten my soul. But I can't control the rain that keeps falling, smiling on the outside that never comes in. Comedy, mystery, irony, tragedy. So I scream, let the show begin. You break me open, turn on the light, stumble inside with me, with me. Do I entertain you? Do I preoccupy you with my wit to cover this lie? Do I mesmerize? Do you think me faithful? Do you think me a clown? I picked out this shirt. I put on this hat. I wore this paint just for you. You see, I'm always the type to be put behind the fence. It's moments like these that I stand aloof, hiding in the background, waiting. I'm quiet at times, not because of me being shy, but I'm watching for the next ball to be thrown over the fence. Will the next one be thrown be for entertainment, or will someone open the gate and let me in and be a part of their world? I imagine myself at times, still at school, wondering if I will be a part of social norms. And at times, I feel like the leper who has to be separated because of his disease. And like the leper, I often cry within myself, unclean, unclean. If I'm quiet, I'm still there, sitting on the swings away from the fence. And from my perspective, no one is around. In an odd way, that feels safer. I could just sit on the swings and be myself. No one dared to laugh at me. Then I always waited for someone to come. Then again, I always waited for someone to come through the gate and show me they can be trusted to some degree. I still do. But there is one man who has dared to sit next to me, whispering to me, saying, go your way. Your faith has made you whole. His heart is full of mercy and compassion. He's touched he is touched with our infirmity. He understands all. For he was in all points tempted like we are, yet without sin. His desire is that we come boldly into the throne of grace, that we might obtain mercy and find grace to help in time of need. This man stands with me behind the fence. That's because he opened the veil to let me through his Father's throne of favor. I will tell you more about this man who came into my life in a minute. Now, friendship would be confusing to me during the school. Oh, sorry, let me start again. Friendship would be confusing to me in that during school I would never be normal as others. But outside of school, Evan and Ryan and I would catch a Evan and Ian Evan and Ryan. His name is not Ian. With Evan and I and I, with Evan and Ryan, I would catch a glimpse of normalcy, but never attaining it. They were good friends who tried to make me feel normal, but always felt I came short. Even though I had canes, I would slowly ignore my cerebral palsy and just pretend to be as normal as possible. Evan and I lived across the street from each other while Ryan lived away from us. Evan and I would play often with each other. He was the first friend I ever played football with. He would be a receiver and I would be a quarterback, sitting on my knees, throwing the ball. One day, as all boys do, challenging each other into a dare. And that dare was to write on the wall with crayons. See, we were really young, really small at this time, and we really didn't know any better. It would be no problem except one thing. It was my room, and not Evan's. So he began to write on the walls, and I didn't want to get into trouble, so I told him to stop, and he didn't. Mom finally came in and was so upset. I told Evan to go home. I told me that my father would be furious when he sees this. He being furious was an understatement, since my father had a temper at the time, and I knew that if he found out, I would get the brunt of his wrath. At the time, I had learned that there was a deity to pray to through Evan's mom, and she had told us that if we prayed, he will answer our prayers. So I tried my newfound faith and started to pray. I asked him if he was real, then he would make my dad less angry at me. Well, Dad came home and saw what had been done and threw me on the bed and started cursing at me and beating me. To say he was heavy-handed was an understatement. I cried for hours after that, pleading and telling him I wasn't the one who wrote on the walls, but I wasn't believed at all. And then as soon as he left, I got off my bed. I took my cane and threw it at the wall. I shouted at this newfound deity, I don't believe you anymore. This was my journey into atheism. Even as a young age, I'm going to say around 6 or 7. It was at this moment that I vowed I would never allow myself to believe in anything such as this anymore. I had kept this a secret since my friend was a believer, and so were Mom and Grandma. To this day, I don't think most of my family and friends at this time knew I was an atheist until I met the Father later on in my life. It wasn't long after this that I had gotten into deeper trouble with my dad. Evan and I had decided to see what my toys would look like burned up, since fire fascinated me at the time. So I began to put toys in the furnace, and the house would begin to catch on fire, and both Evan and I ran out of the house thinking this would be it for us. We eventually were found and punished heavily for it. The house was spared, save only the hallway. That day changed my relationship with many people. My fault, of course, but it caused a fence, I think, between my family and I to some extent. During this time, I would have surgeries and be left alone in a room. I felt so cold at times and scared. Some days, only my mom would come by to see me, and some days my grandma came by. So once again, I was behind the fence all alone, and eventually Mom and Dad divorced. I blamed myself for it, of course, because of the fire in the house. My mom got remarried, and we moved to Northern California, and I really had no one there except myself. Joanna and Judy would be off doing their own things with their own friends. Mom would be going off to work, picking up my sisters and taking them to softball practice and games. Well, I would go there with them, but I still felt alone. TV became my best friend at the time. While I did go to school and made friends, home is where I wanted to be. Mom did try her best to include me on activities we were while we were there, like bowling leagues, horseback riding, and even baseball leagues for handicapped people. Active, yes, but still feeling alone and still not normal. Even in my own, quote, people, I still felt different from them. While I remained positive on the outside, inside I felt like dying both literally and metaphorically. Being around 10 or 11, I started feeling like I was a burden to people, especially to my mom. But I would still try to smile and press on as much as I could. While the pain of living grew inside of me, I truly didn't want to live anymore. Mom divorced her second husband, and we moved back to Southern California. My Uncle Robbie had come and helped us, and we moved for a short time, for a short season, in my grandparents' house. Dad at this time was remarried and wanted us to move back in with him. Meanwhile, I would be spending a lot of time with my grandparents on the weekends and long summers with them. I would find my safe place there and just get into my world alone. I had reconnected with Evan, and we spent a lot of time together as well. And wanting to spend more and more time with him, I wanted to go to school where he was. My dad had given me a choice at the time: either go back to special education or go to Buena Terra Elementary. I chose to go to Buena Terra in the hopes of staying with Evan. Some friends would come and some friends would go during this time, but I would still feel empty and alone and still wanting to die. Evan eventually went his own way and I mine. I still remember the last time he and I were together. We were playing football as usual with a friend of ours, and he had said that he and the other friend needed to go to his house and he would be right back. So I stayed waiting for him to show back up. He never did. I cried knowing that this would be the last time I would see him. I would then go on to my grandparents' house that summer and go into my safe place. My great-grandmother and grandmother would try to cheer me up by playing a game called Bunko. I often played that. That summer, we would play so many games and laugh and have fun. Aunt Debbie would take me to the movies. My Uncle Jeff would be there for me most of the time and even took me to his job as a delivery person. He was like a brother to me that I never had. But eventually, I would have to go back to school and be alone again. My daily ritual was school and home, but felt dead inside and didn't want to do anything. No one was around. Dad worked nonstop. Mom was busy with her new life. Joanne with her social life, and Judy with her school activities and eventual graduation. The hardest year in all of this was 1984, 1984. I'm not that young. My grandmother had died. It hit me like a ton of bricks. I love that woman very much. She was and still is the one that connected me to the past. The way she would tell stories of how she was as a girl, it fascinated me so much. So I wanted to learn about history. The funny thing is, I didn't cry when I first heard the news. I just sat there, shocked. Then went into my room and did something very strange, and that was laugh. I felt guilty about that. I thought there was something wrong with me. Later on, I would learn that it's the way I coped with the pain of losing her. My life for my family changed that day. It shattered me even more to pieces than I already was. I couldn't take it anymore. I was getting bad grades, and Dad was yelling at me, and all I wanted was my grandmother back. I wanted my friends back. People were rarely there, but all I wanted was to leave this earth. The fence had become abundantly more pronounced, and I wasn't allowed, it seemed, to be a part of people's lives. The gate seemed to be closed shut for me, and it was time to leave. So I packed up and left on my three-wheeler bike for one last day. I had taken a book to read and some snacks and a Pepsi to drink. Not a sponsor. Trying to remember what it was like before I knew there was a fence between the people I loved and I. All it did was bring more sorrow and sadness in my life. So I left to go on a freeway and wanting to end it there. I figured it would be the easiest way to go if I was going to get hit by a fast-moving car, since my attempt at taking pills failed because I didn't know if they would work or not. But going into going left and into traffic, that was a sure bet. I pedaled and pedaled and pedaled, crying, and yet not afraid to die. It was nighttime, and I had traveled as far as I could, and in my mind, I knew that it was time to go. So my plan was to turn left into oncoming traffic and hope to get hit as hard as I could. I took a deep breath. I tried to turn the wheel, but it was stuck. I couldn't turn it no matter how hard I tried. I also tried pedaling as hard as I could, and they wouldn't go either. I was stuck at the moment. It was as if something was holding it still and not allowing me to budge.